Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the information session for the Eating Psychology Online Transformation Program with Real Meal Revolution. This is totally different to any of our other programs, but I'm here to address the emotional side of eating. So we're going to talk about binge eating, emotional eating, craving, binges, out of control, how it all happens, and how this impacts yo-yo dieting. So if you've ever been on a diet before, and you found that it worked and then you've fallen off the bus, this is the conversation you need to be involved in. I'm going to be talking about the theory behind our program. Then I'm going to tell you a little bit about the program itself and then discuss the deals and how it all works. So this is the typical situation that a lot of our clients find ourselves in. They get derailed, they're eating well, everything's going well. And then all of a sudden they find themselves wrapped in their blankie, eating ice cream out the tub or smashing a bunch of chuckles if you're in South Africa, something along those lines. So I want to take you through some of the processes that are involved and what the angles are that we look at these issues from. That's at Real Meal. So I want you to imagine something different. I want you to imagine what it would be like to arrive at a buffet or arrive at a party, and you're looking at all the options and you just feel steady in your resolve. You're not wondering, having this anxious conversation with yourself. Should I, shouldn't I, should I, shouldn't I have the bread? Should I, shouldn't I have the chocolate? You're just like steady and you feel comfortable in your own skin and you feel confident in the decisions you're making, but also confident in yourself. Now, I want you to know that that is a realistic possibility for you. I know that in the past, even if you have lost weight, you may not have felt like that, and you may have been thinner than you were before you started, but you may still have had that anxiety. And so I want to tell you that that is why we designed this program, because there's no meal plan that can actually give you that feeling. And so this is just a note from Irina. Irina lives in Mauritius. She actually owns a slimming clinic, and she went on the Eating Psychology Online Transformation Program. She actually lost 9 kilograms while she was on the program with us. And she left a comment on the post I used to promote this exact webinar. And she said, this is the best program in the universe. So this is a certified health coach. She has a slimming clinic, and she says it's the best program she's ever been on. And she services all the wealthy people who come into Mauritius on holiday, and also a lot of the locals over there. So like I said, we're going to talk about theory, talk about how the program works, and we're going to discuss the deal. So I had this conversation with a client the other day, and she was telling me, basically, she signed up again for Real Meal, and she said, she couldn't actually get a grip. So she downloaded a meal plan. She's looking at this thing, and she knows all the food's going to help her lose weight. She's lost weight before, but she keeps going to the fridge, and she keeps going to kind of like feed, and she doesn't seem to understand why. But she without paying attention, she finds herself eating. And so I said to her, well, what was it like when you were successful? What was it like when you were getting results? And she says, no, it was easy. 5 years ago, I just remember it being effortless. I was focused and I was motivated, and I was actually inspired by the food I was eating. And it's the same meal plan this time, but this time I just don't feel inspired and I don't feel energized. So then I asked her a couple more questions and said, okay, well, tell me about life. Tell me about what life was like back then. What was it like 5 years ago? She says, I was just married. My husband was out and he was working. And so he was paying for our lifestyle and I was in a happy relationship. So I said, okay, cool. Well, that sounds amazing. And then I didn't want to ask her directly, but we carried on talking. And what I discovered was that now she had actually been divorced, and she is the single mom of a diabetic child. So since then she's had a child. So she's not only a single mom of a diabetic child, she's a single mom of a young child. So it must be the oldest 4. And she had to start her own business to make ends meet. So in the past, when she had a healthy relationship, she was a stay-at-home mom or a stay-at-home housewife, or let's just say that money wasn't stressing her out, her resolve was really strong. In other words, it was effortless. She felt inspired to eat healthily. But now divorced, so it's dealing with a broken relationship, high pressure of being a single mom, and the high pressure of owning her own business, life has totally changed. And so she's sitting in the meeting going, oh, I have no willpower. I can't stick to the diet. My resolve's gone. And I'm saying, hey, look at the rest of your life and then think about why, you can't stick to the diet. Maybe there's actually nothing wrong with the diet and nothing wrong with your resolve, but there's actually something wrong with, you're in a completely different life state. And that's really the beginning of what this program is about. So how yo-yo dieting works over time, this is what usually happens. So there's a study that shows that diets actually cause weight gain, which is totally counterintuitive. But how it works is like over time, on average, obviously there are people who lose weight and keep it off, but over time what happens is we do a restrictive diet, as you can see over here. So we start dieting, and then at the end of that diet, we put on some weight. And then what happens is we go on the diet again, and then we lose weight. And then once we go off the diet, we put on weight again. And usually we put on more weight than what we lost. So we end up heavier than we were before we started the diet. And this process repeats itself. And that's why you can speak to someone who is what we call a veteran yo-yo dieter, who started dieting when they were 10 or 15 or 20, and they reach 60 years old and they've been on and off diets their whole lives. And at 60, they weigh 50 kilograms more than they did when they were 20 years old. And you've got to ask yourself, is there a correlation between diets and losing weight, or is there something else going on that's causing this constant weight gain and this need to claw back? And so this is where I want to introduce you to the binge cycle. And so the binge cycle, how it works is usually we feel guilty or ashamed of what our body looks like. We feel, and I've got this with drinking, and I've had this with smoking cigarettes in the past. I feel unhealthy, I feel dirty, I feel like I did some bad stuff when I was drunk or whatever. And maybe you feel embarrassed to be in a costume, or you don't feel comfortable socializing. And so what happens is you restrict yourself. And as you restrict, that actually gives you a brief feeling of a relief of anxiety. So you feel like, okay, things are going to get better now. I'm looking after myself. I'm going to get some results. I'll be more attractive. I'll feel more confident. And then everything will be okay. But what happens is we start to crave the thing that we've given up. As soon as you take something away, it begins to increase in value in your mind. So you start to see the food that you missed and you feel deprived of it. And so that deprivation builds up. And eventually you get cravings. And these cravings can be emotional mostly, but also physical. So when you do quit something that your body craves, like sugar or carbohydrates, you actually have physical cravings. So you've got physical and emotional cravings. And then what happens next is you get triggered. So if you're not triggered, if life's cool, breezy, and you're quitting chocolate, for instance, absolutely fine, you won't have any problems. But as soon as something happens, like you get slammed with a bill that you weren't expecting, you have a huge fight with your boyfriend or girlfriend, you get into a car accident, all of a sudden you need to soothe, and boom, you get triggered, and then you go and have a binge. And a binge can be subtle, half a slab of chocolate, or it can be a full-on carbohydrate orgy. It doesn't matter. But what happens is we binge. And after that binge, sometimes the binge can be multiple binges over a period of months where you put on more weight, but sometimes it can be just a one-off bender, like a drinking binge where you have a big Friday night and then you wake up in the morning, or you wake up 3 months later, you've put on weight, or you've got a beast of a hangover, and you feel guilt and shame. And so what is the thing to do to get rid of this guilt and shame? It's to restrict yourself and give yourself that relief of anxiety. But as we've said, over time, it builds up back into cravings, which then when you are triggered, you act on. And so this is what is happening behind yo-yo dieting. And so the weird thing about this is that guilt and shame are feelings. Relief from anxiety is related to feelings. Emotional cravings, these are related to feelings. Physical cravings are related to nutrition. I will give nutrition that. But then triggers are also related to our feelings. And so the finding here is that the best diet in the world doesn't actually address the main problem. It only addresses the physical cravings. And most of the time, diets cause physical cravings and they don't take them away. And so what you've got when you go on a diet is you're causing physical cravings and you're not addressing anything else. So even the best diet in the world only addresses 20% of this problem. And so what we've got here and what we believe about successful health transformations is that the 80% of a healthy transformation actually relates to the 80% of the binge cycle, which is around cravings, around anxiety, emotional cravings, and being triggered. And there are many things that deal with that, as well as the shame that comes from failure. That is the stuff that is actually going to help you have lasting change. And so what's happening in the yo-yo diet is we put on weight and then this binge cycle kicks in. We put on weight and then we think, restrict, and then we lose weight. And then when we get to our goal weight, or when we lose weight a bit, we get triggered, and then all of a sudden we binge and put on weight, and we often put on more than what we started with. And then that cycle repeats itself, and we go down and up and down and up. And so this is just a comment on the PSYCH program. This is Alison from France. She said this is the first time in 6 decades. So Alison, I think, is 70, and so she spent 6 decades yo-yo dieting. So she says the first time in 6 decades that she has been brave enough to lift the curtain on triggers and the psychological reasons for her overeating. And she says it's all thanks to Armand. She was on the PSYCH program. And the reason this is the way we look at it is because feelings drive behavior. So first we feel, and then we act, and then we think. And so what we want to do is think about all of this stuff so that we can actually think about our feelings and perhaps change the way we feel about certain things, or control the way we feel so that we act differently, and not change the way we act, because changing the way we act won't change the way we feel. And so how it all comes down is when you find yourself staring at the fridge all the time, and what that client who I was speaking about at the beginning, what she was going through was she was finding herself mindlessly eating. She was experiencing stress or sadness or exhaustion or fear, or she was irritable, she was lonely, she was angry, or she was just thirsty. But only like 1 in every 10 times she went to the fridge was she actually hungry. In fact, she might never have been hungry because she was eating all the time. And just a bit more on that, there's this guy, Johan Hari. He wrote 2 incredible books, one on addiction and one on depression. And I think it's because he is an addict and he suffers from depression. And he says we're not machines with broken parts. In other words, we're not just these biological organisms that need the right muti to fix the body. We are animals whose needs are not being met. And he talks about the biology and the psychology of humans and animals. And when we are communal creatures, or we are supposed to be social creatures, and there are parts of our psyche that aren't being, or parts of our required, parts of our needs that aren't being satisfied as communal animals, then we act out and we try to find ways to soothe those shortages, and sometimes food is the best bet. And so he writes a lot about addictive behavior as well, and he says the opposite of addiction is not sobriety. In other words, the opposite of eating out of control eating isn't controlling your eating. He says the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it's human connection. And so what we use in this program is ways to rebuild your connection with yourself and connection with others, but also deal with all of that emotion and unpack all of that so that there isn't an emotional trigger to be soothed with a binge. So just to summarize, what I'm saying is that if you look at this binge cycle, a meal plan is not going to fix this. So if you have been on one diet, lost weight, put it on, another diet, lost weight, put it on, you can go on another meal plan and another meal plan and another meal plan, but you're never going to address the behavior of going on and off the meal plan. It doesn't matter how hard you white knuckle it. It doesn't matter how much you think it's going to be different this time. The only way to address the yo-yo dieting phenomenon or pattern in your life is to address this side of the binge cycle. And so you want to get, you want to relieve anxiety in its totality, not just relieving it with a little bit of restriction. And then you want to remove cravings, but remove them properly. In other words, understand them, connect with the cravings, and actually get them out of your life. Then you want to look at triggers and understand how you are triggered and why you are triggered and why the things that trigger you actually trigger you and what's underneath those triggers. And then when you do fall off the bus, by the way, falling off the bus is like, there is no one who doesn't fall off the bus. Even the most successful movie stars, the supermodels, everyone has their own version of falling off the bus. And I've seen people who only have 5 kilograms to lose fall off the bus and be incredibly tough on themselves and shame themselves for failing, in inverted commas. And then I've seen people with 50 kilograms to lose who fall off the bus and they immediately forgive themselves, carry on, and stay focused and end up getting to their goals. And so we have to deal with the guilt and shame we experience, because this guilt and shame is what drives us to dive so hard into these extreme diets. So if you feel guilty and ashamed on a Sunday and promise yourself that Monday will be different and then go all in, that is the beginning of this restriction cycle. And the only way to take that behavior away, or just to even understand why you should take it away, is to deal with the guilt and shame up front so that you can go back steady without being extreme. And so we have to make peace with ourselves and make peace with that. And I know a lot of you are sitting there going, no, but if I've been disgusting over a weekend, then I should restrict myself on Monday. Otherwise, I'll never get back to where I was. The only problem is that when you shame yourself and you restrict yourself, then you create an association between the dieting behavior and pain, because you know that if you fail at dieting, you're going to experience pain from your own berating. And what often happens is we sabotage ourselves, or we never even try, because we know if we try, we're likely to fail. And if we fail, we're going to get berated. So one of the ways to do it is to stop berating yourself. And then subconsciously, you are less afraid of failing. But that's a whole nother discussion for another time. So we also want to stop restrictive dieting. And I know for me, that might sound strange, because Jonno, you tell people to stop eating carbohydrates. And there are ways to do that internally. So where you reframe the way that you look at restriction, because restricting yourself from one thing can be opening up the door to other things. So we look at the psychology of how we see restriction and how we experience restriction, so that you can actually stop doing things that are unhealthy, but not feel restricted by it. In other words, it's not about willpower. You actually feel empowered by your decision and motivated, which is the opposite of restriction. And then if you are never anxious, you never have emotional cravings, and you know how to deal with triggers, you never experience the need to actually binge. And if you never binge, you never have to deal with the shame. And even if you do, you do. So basically, if you can relieve anxiety, remove cravings, remove triggers, and make peace with what happens when you fail, there's never a need to overly restrict yourself, and there's never a need to binge. In other words, you just destroy the binge cycle, and you can focus on the future and be at ease with your progress and your failures. So imagine this is just what eating was like. And this is what it feels like to go to that buffet table I showed you in the beginning of my presentation, where I said, imagine arriving at this table and you feel steady in your resolve and you feel comfortable in your own skin. You're not worried about are people watching me fill this plate? What if I put a potato on the plate? Am I going to be judged? Should people be thinking I shouldn't eat that? None of that's going on in your mind. You're just like la-di-da, chatting, filling your plate, eating it, and carrying on with your life like nothing happened. So it's control over your thoughts, control over your emotions, and control over your eating, but in a peaceful way, not in a white-knuckling way. And so this is Maggie. Maggie did the eating psychology program. She said, I have spent 3 decades, that's most of my life, losing weight, then putting on double or triple that weight, using every diet from cabbage soup to weekly weigh-in clubs. After only 3 weeks of the eating psychology program, I've gained more insight into the eating patterns sustaining that behavior that I have in the preceding 30 years. For the first time, I have hope and excitement for the future, all wrapped up in a huge dollop of gratitude. She does say she lost 15 kilos, but disclaimer here is that the 15 kilos she lost were actually, she started a different program of ours before she did the Eat Psych program. So I think it might have been like 6 weeks or something, maybe even 12. Anyway, cool. So I'm sure there's a lot to take in. And you're probably sitting there going like, what's that all about? I don't understand. And yeah, fascinating. In fact, so I don't know if the technology pulled this name through because of all the data protection, but on this Facebook post live, one of our members has just said, this is totally game changing. And without PSYCH, part of this journey, I would be falling off the wagon every single day. The knowledge gained from this and the way that it has changed my mindset is mind blowing. No more FOMO ever. Amazing. Thank you so much. Okay. So it's a lot to take in, but obviously I'm going to explain how it works. So first, I want to introduce you to Victoria. So Victoria is our clinical psychologist. She has a background in working with hectic drug addiction, family abuse, alcohol abuse, and eating addiction. In fact, and she's worked with body dysmorphia and eating disorders as well. Victoria was the psychologist on, I think, the world's first sugar addiction inpatient program that was run out of Hout Bay in Cape Town with Corin Thompson. So she was the psychologist on that program. And so she has basically dedicated her entire career to healing relationships with food. And that's linked to her own story where Victoria grew up with a tormenting relationship with food and was put on diets at a very young age. So she's very, very passionate about it. And so the Eating Psychology Online Transformation Program combines Victoria's knowledge and theory on eating psychology with our expertise at running online programs. So we run amazing online programs. We organize all the Zoom and everything and facilitate the whole thing. So onboarding, making sure everyone comes to workshops, making sure people have done all their homework, making sure people are getting value and getting lots of feedback. And we've developed this program to transform your psychology. So it's a transformation program. It is different to an online course. An online course, the goal of the online course is to get you to the outcome is that you leave with knowledge. We want you to have knowledge, but we want you to leave with results. So we want you to change the way you see food at the end. And that is much more important to us than getting knowledge. Even if you don't know anything new, but you've changed your relationship with food, that is better for us than if you leave knowing a whole lot of stuff, but you haven't actually done anything or changed the relationship. So that's the difference between an online transformation program and an online course. Now, Hermana, who is one of our clients, this is actually an old photograph of her. She's lost 14 kilograms, I think, since this picture. And so she says, saying you have to love yourself doesn't mean you have to look a certain way to love yourself. So this is one of her insights that she's learned from the program. And she did this in a live interview with me. It was about shifting the focus to more real things, working on anxiety, depression, and learning that they are all connected to the way she eats. So that's one of the outcomes that she had. Now, Liz has lost a ton of weight since our last chat as well. This was fresh out of the Eating Psychology program. She's since gone on to lose a whole bunch of weight. And she says you have to start with the relationship with yourself and then your relationship with food, because that is part of your relationship with yourself. So she says she's actually realized that there are ways to deal with discomfort that aren't eating. She used to just comfort herself with food all the time. And she says that has been her biggest learning. And then Kath Madgwick. Kath Madgwick is also on the program. She said, and I asked her about, why did she decide to invest this money in the program? She said, well, I thought about how much I'd spent on diets, and I realized I wanted to make a fundamental difference. And that fundamental difference only happens when we address what lies beneath the behavior, not the behavior itself. She's really, really happy. Okay, so this is about our psychology and the way our psychology drives our eating. And so you can go and see a therapist. And if you go and see a therapist, there are therapists who run programs, but a lot of therapists like to just see what comes up in the moment. And so you can't be sure what you're going to get from each therapist and whether they are an expert in the eating psychology. But you arrive at a session, see what comes up, and sometimes you'll go down a rabbit hole. But in general, there aren't therapists that run like fixed programs with fixed outcomes that they have. It can actually take years. So you could see a therapist once every 2 weeks for 1 year, 2 years, but they don't have a fixed goal for you. They're going to do it in your own time at a pace that works, provided you can show up at all the workshops, etc., etc. And therapy is really expensive. So I just did some research online to see what it costs to attend a therapy session in different countries. And so this is not a conversion from the different exchange rates. This is just what it costs in each country. So it's cheapest in South Africa to have therapy. On average, it's about 1,200 Rand an hour. In the UK, it's about 135 pounds. The US, it's $110 a session. And in Australia, about $260 a session. So it is an expensive thing. And if you add that up over a year, it can work out to 62,000 Rand. So that's a weekly session. 7,000 pounds if you add up the pound rate per hour over a year. And I think I'm trying to figure out what takes the most. I think it's in the UK. That's 14,000 Rand. That's 140,000 Rand in the UK. So it's really, really expensive to go and address this problem with a therapist. Okay. And remember that if you go for that therapy, there isn't necessarily a guarantee that you will experience a dynamic shift in your relationship with food. So it's not necessarily a focused program about losing weight and healing your relationship with food. So with the Eating Psychology Transformation Program, it is a 12-week program. It is really intense, but it's a 12-week online program. And so there are 12 two-hour workshops. So that's 24 hours of therapy-focused advice, specifically targeted at your relationship with food, and there is weekly homework. So it is a contained space to reconnect and be vulnerable and put an end to the binge cycle. And so one of the things that I didn't mention is that sharing your experience and writing are two scientific ways, or scientifically proven ways, to actually heal elements of your psyche. And so that is encouraged. In fact, it's baked into the program, which doesn't necessarily feature in a standard therapy journey. So this is the cost of the program. It's 12,000 Rand for 12 weeks, which works out to 1,000 Rand a week. And there's a 2-hour workshop every week. So even if you just look at the costs and the value of the workshops, 2 hours of therapy, 600 Rand, that works out really well. But I want to tell you a bit more about the price. So I feel like I've had a total life revelation. For the first time in years, I have been able to move out of life paralysis and start making enjoyable and healthy choices for myself that extend far beyond the food I put into my mouth. So she's making choices about her whole life that are serving her better. I have always tried to treat the symptom and have never looked at the cause. This will take you back to square one so that you can understand why you do what you do and then nurture you through making different decisions. The result is not only weight loss, but a totally holistic and sustainable life improvement. So that's Jess Barker from Sedgefield, and that's her experience. So I just want to run you through a quick comparison, because a lot of people are like 12,000 Rand, oh my goodness. I look at 12,000 Rand, I'm like, oh my God, this is like such a good deal. And this is why I see it like this. Because if you go for therapy, there's no guarantee on the theory you're going to get. You're not necessarily going to get like well-formulated notes. These notes are targeted. We've spent hours making sure these are targeted at the perfect amount of information. So not enough to overwhelm you, but the right amount to get you to really think about what's happening. Then 24 hours of therapy, these one-on-one sessions, whereas we've got 24 hours of therapeutic workshops. So this is actually going to help you learn more, where you get an insight and you go into a breakout room and you share with a tiny group of people. So it's 1 or 2 other people and you share insights in a very safe space. It's not recorded. What stays in the vault, what happens in the vault stays in the vault. Now, if you're a therapist, you may or may not get homework. Sometimes therapists do give you homework, but we have homework in a sequential format, and it's week 1, and you need to do week 1 before you do week 2, etc., etc. So we take you through a specific process that each step primes you for the next step in this journey and this transformation. Now, with therapy, you might have a therapist who has lower boundaries and they allow you to email. We have peer support, which is tailored to this journey. We know exactly what you are going through, and we have a support team or a success coach you can reach out to. You can reach out to the therapist for more guidance, and the whole program is tailored for human connection. So you're not alone on this journey, and you might think you don't want to talk to anyone about what's going on with you in your relationship with food, but there are other people out there going through exactly what you are going through, and those are the people who we pair you with. And obviously, with the therapist, you leave the session, you're on your own. You can talk to your husband or wife about it. You can talk to your friends. But ultimately, you are on your own unless you find someone else to chat to. Whereas here, you are not on your own. There are many people to chat to and many resources available for you to connect. And so you can have the therapy route, which is like 30,000 Rand or 3,000 pounds or 2,500, $600 or 6,000 Oz dollars. Or you can have this route, which is actually better. It's going to give you more hands-on advice. It's going to give you peer support. It's going to give you targeted notes, sharing workshops, and it's going to be shorter than a year because it's just 12 weeks. And that's only going to cost you 12,000 Rand or 600 pounds or $800 or 1,100 Oz dollars. So this program is more effective than therapy. It has proven results, and it is like a third of the price, or in some cases, much less than a third of the price of the therapeutic route. And so think about how much money you've spent on a diet in the past. Over the years, how much money have you spent on diets, and what results have those brought up for you? So if you're thinking about what you're going to do next year, or how you're going to, how it's going to be different, my challenge to you is to think about how you could make it different. And if you find yourself going on a diet every year and you're still heavier than you were when you were 25 or before you had children, what is it going to take to get you those results and have them last? And so my challenge to you is to consider doing something different, because they say the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. So going on a diet over and over again, expecting lasting change. And so this is something different that you can do that is going to get you results in a completely different way that will enable you to actually follow through and serve yourself by sticking to whatever diet that you aim to go on. So to get control over your eating in 12 weeks, it costs 12,000 Rand or 600 pounds or $800 or 1,100 Oz dollars. And here, I'm just going to go through a few of my questions. If you have any questions, leave the comments on the post and we'll get back to them as soon as possible. But to end the war with your weight, we start the next one on the 10th of January, and that is a 4 p.m. On a Monday. So those 2 workshops, and then you get homework in between. And then we start another one in February, which will start at 9 a.m. South African time, so that Australians and anyone on Far East can join. So we do Monday afternoons so that people in America, the UK, and Canada can join our timeline because we start late. And then in Australia, we start 6 weeks later so that you can join in your evenings. Okay, how does payment work? So we have some payment options. You can pay up front, you can via credit card, you can EFT us, and you can also get a 3-month plan, which is done by a company called Pages Now in South Africa. So you can get instant approval and you get a finance plan. So you pay them off over 3 months, but they actually pay us directly. So we don't manage the debt. So that's how you can pay in installments. And what time are the workshops? So I just went through the workshop times. What if you can't make a workshop? Look, we advise you go to the workshops. We don't like to record them because a lot of people share stuff, and so we don't offer recordings. But if you can't make a workshop, we'll still give you the homework and fill you in on what went down and what's required. So if you have any other questions, please post them. Let us know what's going on and what your concerns are, whether you think we've missed anything. But I can guarantee you this program is life-changing. This is the future of diet. In fact, this is where I actually see the weight loss industry going. If I had a goal right now, my goal for the health and weight loss industry is that we see this more as a mental health challenge than as a biology challenge. I think there are many diets that work. There are also many diets that don't work. But in reality, what we're dealing with is discomfort, and we're unsatisfied with ourselves. And I think if we address that dissatisfaction and the things that drive us to act in a self-destructive manner, it would be much easier for us to decipher what the right diet is or the right lifestyle changes to implement. So thank you very much for joining. Please leave a comment if you enjoyed that, and please send us a message if you have any questions. And I hope to see you in January at the Eating Psychology program. And if you're in the Far East, I hope to see you in February when we launch the Eastern Time one. All the best and have a wonderful festive season.